Features from the world of Microsoft Power Platform. So today in this video we're going to look at some tips and tricks around Power Apps, a few things that I've picked up over the last few weeks which I want to share. There's some very interesting features which I hadn't been aware of, which really do affect the way that you structure and go about building applications, particularly in Canvas apps, which we'll have a look at in this short video. So the first thing I'm going to look at is actually just a little sort of tip and trick around making your apps look a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit less like the standard sort of Power Apps look and feel. So we're going to have a quick look at the use of background images and things like opacity to sort of give your app a bit more of a three-dimensional and sort of modern look and feel. We're going to move on to look at some other features around some new functions that I've discovered, which are really useful. We're going to touch on some layout pieces as well, such as use of the parent command and what that does and what that allows you to do. We'll touch on containers and look at some of the layout options as well that containers and other things give us too along the way. So first of all, here we are back in our familiar Power Apps layout. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create myself a new blank screen. And you'll notice that I've actually uploaded a geometric background image to my images media tab here as well, which I'll go through later, and we'll see how we can use that. So in my brand new blank screen here, I'm going to come across to the right hand side for the properties for the screen. I'm going to come back over here to just rename that first of all. We'll make the screen to the home screen and we'll call that home screen. So I actually want this home screen to have a background image. So let's choose the geometric background image that I've downloaded, which is quite a nice generic sort of image. It makes the app look a little bit more professional rather than just being a lot of white space. So rather than it being the fit, we're going to go for the fill option to fill out all of the available space in this tablet layout app. So the next thing I want to do is look at opacity, because that looks quite nice. We'll start to lay some controls over the top of that using containers and some different opacity controls to make it look a bit more three-dimensional, a bit more professional. So I'm not going to go through all of the steps of creating a component. You can look at some of my other videos for that. But just for now, I'm going to bring in a label onto the page. I'm just going to extend that out the full width of the page here. And I'm just going to centralize that and make the font a bit larger. We'll centralize that and we'll just call that home now, for want of a better phrase. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here. Actually, I'll go to the top and go to the properties drop down. It's a bit more explanatory if I do that. So we're going to go to the fill property for this label that we're using. Currently it's just 0000. So we're going to change that to a nicer color, kind of a darker color that we'll use for that. So let's go for a, say 100, 100, 100. You notice that actually nothing's changed until I change this last number to 1, when it goes to a very sort of dark grey kind of color. So the last value in the RGBA is the opacity, which is a value between 0 and 1. So I'm just going to take that back to 0.7. Let's try actually 0.6 or 5. There we go. So you can just now see that some of the lines from the background image are starting to show through the label at the top. Just gives it a slightly nicer look and feel, rather than just having blocks of things on the page with words in them, just to make your applications look a little bit nicer and more modern. So we've put a background image in. We've had a little look at the opacity there, so it's worth playing around with that opacity at the end. Somewhere between 0.5 and 0.7 is usually quite nice, depending how dark your color is as well. It just allows the background to show through a little bit and makes it look a little bit more nice. So a couple of other things we want to just have a quick look at here as well. So one of them is around the component, so not the component, the container control. So let's put a container on the page. It's worth talking about what these are and what they do, because there's essentially one really clever thing about them which makes them something you want to use pretty much in all of your applications. So as you've seen in previous videos and other places you may have looked, when you add something to a page like a button, and I've added that inside the control. Let's add that outside just for explanatory reasons. So I can move that button anywhere within my canvas. It can be top left, it can be bottom left, it can be anywhere. I can drag and drop it and place it anywhere that I like, and it'll stay there. But essentially what I'm doing when I do that is I'm setting my X and Y values. So that's currently 1170. If I move it around, you can actually see it changing real time as I'm moving it. So that's what I'm just basically setting a number of pixels for X and for Y. So Y is how far down it is from the top. So that's 0, and then that's as far as it will go in this layout. So that's really all you're doing when you're moving things around. But these figures are based on how far it is from the top left hand corner. So if I bring that to here, that's a 0Y and a 0X. If I bring it all the way sort of here, we're kind of a square amount out from the corner now, so that's 97X and 93Y. So essentially all we're doing when we move things is we're telling the app what the coordinates of that top left corner is going to be relative to the top left corner of the entire application. So that's one way of going about that. And you'll notice if I bring it all the way down here, then we've got some big numbers appearing up here. So let me just delete that one for a second. In fact, what I'll do is just rename that and just call that button 1, just because we're going to lead neatly into another demonstration shortly. So I'm just going to copy that, and then I'm going to actually click on this container that I put in here. I'm going to paste that inside that container. So you'll notice now actually that I can't drag it outside of that container. And another interesting thing has occurred. If I look at the X and Y values of this button, we've got that button there. It's the one I want actually, wrong button. Let's go to X. See at 0, we've got 0X and we've got a 0Y. Yeah, it's in the middle of the page. So this is the interesting thing that I've picked up that containers allow us to do, is that anything that goes inside them picks up its own independent X and Y values. Which is really handy for all sorts of layout reasons. Like I could build a form or a control or whatever I needed to build out inside my container, and then I could position that centrally on the page, for example, and then everything else that's inside it would be slaved to the position of that container. So I haven't got to deal with every single control moving around the page. I might just want to have this one panel centralized on the page, for example, and then have these buttons and things fixed inside it. So I can't, that's sort of slaved inside the panel now. I can't move it out. What we'll do to make that a little bit clearer is we'll just give that a white background. There we go. So we've now looks like we've got a sort of a content panel sitting on top of our textured background. So this button here is free to move anywhere it likes, and it can overlay the panel, but it's not going to go inside it at the moment unless I cut it and paste it inside there. But this button here, I can't pull it outside of the container. It's constrained inside it. And if you look to the left to the tree view, you'll see actually this button here is parented by the home screen, or is a child of the home screen, and alongside the container. But then button 2_1 is a level down because it's inside the container. So very useful things, the containers, for building out sort of areas of functionality on your page. Makes life much easier. So one of the things we might like to do with this panel is have it centralized on the page, so that no matter what size the app is, it's always sort of set in the center. So this brings us a little bit to the idea of programmatically controlling the X and the Y value, which is something that you'll stumble across if you start to look at flexible layouts and responsive layouts heavily. And it also talks heavily about the role of the parent in inverted commas within apps as well, because that's a very important concept to understand. So I'll do a couple of labels just to have a look at that. So we've got a label here inside our container, and rather than that being text, we're just going to change that to parent dot width. So parent dot width is coming back as 500. So let's just centralize that and give that a light fill. So we're going to reuse that. So I'm going to copy this this item here. I'm going to paste one outside of my container back sort of into the window. You can see even though I've copied and pasted exactly the same formula, it's arrived at a different value because the parent is different in both these cases. So this control here, label 3, its parent is container 1, so it's giving me the width of container 1. Whereas this label here, its parent is the home screen, so it's giving me the full app width, if you like, of 1366. So it's important to note that the parent.width property will change depending on the scope of where you're asking for that. And this means everything is related to one another within the app. So let's just pull that over there and park that in the top corner for a minute. Where this becomes very useful is, for example, with this this panel floating in the middle of this app now. If I now grab that and move it, you'll see all the controls that are inside it will shift with it. So it gives me a lot of flexibility with my layout. So let's say I was building an app that required me to fill out a little bit of information here, and then that would generate another panel next to it to fill out a bit more information. And, I've got a nice modular flexibility with my app by building inside containers. But let's say I did want it to be in the middle, and irrespective of the size of the app, let's say this had the ability to change its size. I wanted that always to sit in the middle. I can be a bit smart, and I can actually interfere with the X and Y values programmatically rather than hard coding them. So this is a handy little trick which I've used a lot on some apps I've built recently. So the X value is the left and right, where we'll focus on that one for now. So currently it's hard coded 248 pixels, but I actually want to programmatically determine that to be a position whereby the panel is centered within its parent, which is the application. So I'm going to put in some parentheses. So you can see right now, because I've started to interfere with the X value, it's basically gone to 0 and flung the panel to the far left hand side of the app. But here I'm going to do parent dot width, and we're going to take that away from the width of, or I'm going to take the width of the panel away from the width of the parent, so I can determine how much space there would be around it from left to right. Now, one thing we can do, rather than actually naming a component within its own property, is actually use the self property. Let's use self dot width. So self is basically the component that I'm making the effect on, essentially. So I'm setting an X value for the container. So the self property refers to the container. So rather than me saying container1.width, when I'm actually doing that property on the container one, it seems a bit pointless and a bit unnecessary. So we actually use the self term when we're referring to properties of the object that we're working within. So that's fine so far. Then all I want to do is divide that by 2. And you can see what that's done now. It's centralized that within the middle of the page. And if this app had the scale to fit turned off, and the other responsive features and things enabled, then that would constantly sit exactly in the middle of the page, irrespective of how wide the app was. So essentially, just to go back over that, what that's doing is it's taking the full width of the app, 1366 pixels. It's taking away the width of the object itself, the container, which is 500 pixels. And then whatever's left, which will be a combination of this area over here on the left and this area on the right, it's splitting it into 2, and then it's setting that to be the X value, so the coordinates of this top left corner, essentially. So it works out exactly how much free space there would be and puts it in the middle. Now, the good thing about doing it that way is that if I did change the size of my panel, then it would still remain centralized. So if I grab the corner handle and drag it out, you see it jumped to the center, because it's making that recalculation each time, and it's automatically centralizing that back to the center every time I let go, because it's performing the calculation. Let's pull that in and make that nice and narrow. There we go. So that's quite a handy little hint, especially if you're starting to delve off into responsive apps that will work in either across sort of Teams and desktop, and also different sized tablets and devices and things like that. So just bear in mind the fact that the parent.width, the parent's going to change depending on where your object is in that hierarchy on the left. So the home screen, the screen, for example, is at the root of that hierarchy. The container is at sort of the first level, and the label is at the second level. So this label's parent is the container, now down at 395 pixels. And the parent for this label over here is the home screen itself, which is 1366 pixels wide. So anytime you're using that parent control, just remember that there is a hierarchy here, and things there is a parent-child relationship between things on the left. So that's quite a useful little layout tip. Let's just make this panel a bit bigger. You can see it automatically jumps to the location that we want. So another little tip along those lines, for this button down here, for example, if I want that to stick to the right-hand side, I can again use parent dot width. You can see that sticks it all the way to the far right because I've told it that I want the top left-hand column to be all the way to the right. And then maybe I'll take away 150 pixels. That's not quite enough. Let's say 250 pixels. 200. There we go. That's about right. So the width, the full width of the app, take away the parent width, or sorry, take away 200 pixels. And again, we could have done take away self.width, for example, to actually locate that on the full right-hand side. So handy to play with. One tip here to avoid, and this is something you'll stumble across a lot. If you accidentally move that now, it will remove your formula. So I'll demonstrate this for you now. So at the moment, if I click on that, X is driven by the parent width. If I accidentally grab that and move it, you'll see X is now a hard-coded value. Really easy to do that accidentally. Have something selected you didn't expect. You can always do a Control-Z to bring it back to where it was and bring back your formula, but it's very annoying if you have done a bit of playing around to get your layout to be quite fluid and flexible, and you accidentally move something to tweak it, forgetting that you've set a formula on that. So that's a bit of a pain. So last tip, we've covered off sort of use of background images, a little bit of opacity in the overlaying controls, and then we've talked a little bit around the understanding of the parent properties, and then the use of this container to give me some flexibility. One of the interesting things that I learned only today, actually, which is actually very useful. Let's say we had a form. Let's say we put some text inputs inside here. So a really simple form. We'll put a button or something under there, which is like a submit, perhaps. Let's just fill that form out in a fashion. Hello world. Okay, so let's say we had a form like that, and we had a button here which was to clear the values of that form. Let's put another button in alongside there, which is let's say reset. So let's just give that a better name. This will be txt1. This one can be txt2. That'll do. So let's say when I click the reset button, I want to reset those fields back to how they came originally. So let's go txt1, and then we'll also append onto that a further reset for txt2. Lovely. Okay, so if I come back to test this now, let's do some test value, click reset, and there we go, it goes back to how it was right at the beginning, which is fine. Now, where this becomes very interesting is that later on I might want to, after I've submitted, let's say I filled out this information here as part of a form filling out something, and I hit submit to write that to a data source or something along the lines of that. What I'd quite like to be able to do is to reset the form probably after I've submitted it, because next time I come back round, I'd quite like those fields to have been back how they were. But I don't really want the user to come back and see the same data and click reset. I'd rather do the reset programmatically, but I don't really want to replicate the reset code either that I've written in that reset button, because that's fine. I don't really want to replicate that code at the end of my submit function, because it's the same code in two places. It's not very efficient. So what we can actually do is we can programmatically press this button via other buttons, which means I can reuse the code here that I've done within reset in the submit button. So let's just come to our submit button. Let's put a comment in there. So let's just assume that this sends data to, let's say that sends data to SharePoint as the first step. So now I actually want to do this. Now after I've done that send data, let's assume there's a function in there that does all of that at the top. The next thing I want to do is clear that form for the next time that it's used. So, but I don't want to have to type reset all over again because I've done all that in the reset button. So I just want to use the reset button essentially programmatically. So I'm going to use the select function, and I've got to pass into that whatever my reset button is. So I should have named them properly. Button 4 is in fact for this one. Button 4. There we go. So that's very interesting because I've got a couple of apps where I've got quite a lot of things happening on some buttons in different places, and I really don't want to have to replicate that code again and again. I'm quite happy with where it is, and by actually being able to call that button separately from another location, it means I can store that code in one place and then call it in multiple places, which is really good programming programming ability and programming practice. So let's just put Matt in there, and let's just put Harding in there. So we know if I click reset, that will reset it. And let's do the same thing again here. Now when I click submit, it's actually programmatically clicked the reset button for me, which is really, really good and useful. Really quite intrigued as to how that can work. The only shortcoming for it is that you have to call it from the same page that the control is on. So you can't call that from a completely different page, even though the control names are unique throughout the app. Now, where this could be useful might be, and where I have used it, in fact, if I come up to my home screen, a couple of very useful things on here, which is the on hidden, on visible properties. So what happens when the home page shows and what happens when it's hidden? Slightly different from the app on start function, which is more of a global setup area. But this might be if I'm moving between pages, I want something to happen. So let's say when we actually move away from the home page that I want to clear my form. So on hidden, I'll say select, and it was button 4. So anytime I move away from this page, I want to programmatically press that reset button there. So let's just put in a control to move away from this page. We use this button down here, call that away, and my other screen is called screen 1. So let's just change the on select property for that button. There it is. So we want that to be just to navigate to screen 1. Okay, that's fine. So let's give this a little test. So I'm going to put something in here and surname in there. So I'm not going to click reset or submit. I'm going to click this away button to take me to another page, but because I've set up the on hide, I think it's on hide, that should take that away. So it's taking me back to my home page. Let's come back to the edit mode and jump back to my home screen, and it has cleared them out. So it's the on hidden, so not on hide, on hidden properties being called, and it's programmatically clicked my reset button. So very, very useful feature that, because it means I don't have to duplicate code. If I have got a button like this where I'm resetting a form, and I want to also reset that form when I move away from the page or when I submit the data, if I'm not using proper forms, which there may be reasons why I don't want to. I don't have to replicate all of my reset code. That can live on the reset button. I can call it from the submit button, or I can call it from the on hidden event for the page. So just a few little tips and tricks there that I've picked up over the last few weeks of building apps for people and doing some exam study. Lots and lots more content to come, but hopefully you found that useful. You can add some of those things to the apps that you're building. So hopefully that was interesting, and I shall join you on the next video. Thank you very much.